And we're live with Bill Snyder, CEO of Vivante Health. It's awesome to have you here today, Bill.
John, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. For those out there that don't know Vivante Health and aren't familiar with yourself, can you give us a little bit of a background on both yourself and the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the important part, which would be the company. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do at Vivante. Our mission is to disrupt digital health gut first. And so by that, I mean, we are working with individuals who suffer from chronic digestive conditions and their symptoms. So people that are suffering every single day. And our aim is to reduce those symptoms, improve their overall health and well-being, and really give them their life back. So that's what we wake up thinking about every single day at Vivante.
Great. And how did you end up there? It's
Yeah,
funny. Every time I ask that question. It's something about these CEOs and founders. They always put the company first, which is
you
so.
you've got to. If you're
Yeah.
not, you're doing something wrong. But my background is really in the healthcare space. That's where I grew up. I spent over a decade at Humana in various leadership positions. So really learned kind of the healthcare ecosystem and the business of healthcare. And then I went to an organization, a great company out of San Francisco that's in the digital health space. Learned a lot from the CEO and founder there.
Which one was that?
That was Verta Health in the
Verta
diabetes
Health.
space. Yep. And just a great team, great individuals, and stay in contact with a lot of them today. Love what they were building and what they were doing. But was really pulled to the mission of Vivante. It's just such a tremendous scope in terms of a problem. And when you talk to the members and the patients that we work with, you really hear kind of the pain that they're in, day out. So I was really drawn to that mission. I'm fortunate to say I've got the best job in the world. We're doing some really unique and exciting things, and the team's just been absolutely phenomenal in terms of getting our work done and helping the people that we serve.
Yeah, gut health is a big topic, and it's come more and more into the limelight in the health space in the last few years. Before we dive in there, curious to learn a little bit more about your background. You're not the founder of the company, but you're the CEO, and there's been some leadership changes. And before we click record, you mentioned there's been some shifts, but the mission and the vision has stayed the same. So can you maybe give us just like a high level on when Vivante was started, what was the product, and then how has the product evolved to what it is today, and what is it today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we founded Vivante in 2016, and the mission has always been to focus on individuals who have been suffering from chronic digestive conditions. And I think the product for us has evolved significantly, especially in the past 18 months. And so what we do is we've built a dynamic platform. So it's technology based in terms of our engagement with the individuals. And from there, we connect them with a telehealth-enabled care team. So we support them with registered dietitians and health coaches. I think what's unique about what we've built is we quickly assess the risk of each individual. Because when you think about the bucket of digestive health, there's so many different conditions and symptoms that roll up into that bucket. So we work with individuals who suffer from IBS, from IBD, from GERD. We also work with individuals who don't have a diagnosis today. So they may come to us and say, hey, I don't have a diagnosis. Maybe I'm not on any medication. Maybe I haven't seen a doctor in 2 years, but I wake up every day feeling terrible, whether that's bloating or constipation, you name it. And so for us, what's really important to make sure that we're doing is creating that individualized experience based upon each member, based upon their needs. And so we've built a dynamic platform that does that assesses the risk of each individual and then builds what we call clinical pathways. That's really focused on their condition, their symptoms, and their objectives in terms of improving their symptom and conditions. We support them, as I mentioned, with this dynamic care team that's a group of just unbelievable registered dietitians and health coaches that really support them in their journey. And then along the way, we're gaining additional information to help just continue to personalize that experience.
Super cool. So, and I think one of the things that you guys have done to differentiate yourselves as well is that you guys are distributed through employers, right? You guys don't do a direct to consumer model. Can you walk us through how that decision was made? Was that something that you guys always knew from the get-go? I believe, your previous company, the diabetes management company, was also a direct to carrier, direct to employer model, correct?
Yeah. So John, that's always been kind of our focus, is a B2B2C model. And so by that, we are selling to large self-funded employers and to health plans. And so we are working with both. We're also working with a number of distribution partners. And the model there is, what we knew we could do is have an impact on the individuals. That's what we think about first, is how do we help the member? How do we improve their condition? How do we get them feeling better? Uh, the second piece is, we know that there's a lot of cost in the healthcare ecosystem, especially associated with these conditions. And that cost burden falls to the member themselves, and then also to the plan sponsor, which is often the employer. So we look at that as a great opportunity to get to a number of individuals, a number of members, and the employers that we work with are absolutely phenomenal because they're purchasing this on behalf of the members and saying, hey, here's a no cost benefit to you, where you can get this type of support and this type of care to really get you feeling better, reduce those symptoms, and help you as an individual. So our employer partners have been fantastic. And then we're also working with a number of health plans today as well.
Great. And when you think about the interventions, and I know it's completely personalized, where do they typically fall? Is it mostly diet related? Are there probiotics involved? I know you guys do some stool tests in order to get to that point of being able to prescribe something. Can you walk us through just some of the remedies or solutions that you guys are giving to your patients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the first things that you hear about when you work with Vivante is the clinical rigor that we put into our solution. And so we use evidence-based protocol for everything that we do. So for individuals that come to us with a specific condition or specific symptom, it's often nutrition. It can be lifestyle. If they come to us with a prescribed medication, we're focusing on things like medication adherence. So we're making sure that people that who are taking medication are actually following through and taking that, because it can be difficult, right? People's lives are busy and they're tough, and so we really help those individuals through a number of areas: lifestyle, nutrition, medication adherence, education about their condition or symptom, and then from there you did mention the stool testing. And so one point I always make when we talk about our microbiome analysis, and we've just released a new device as well that we registered with the FDA that we're really excited about. But we're testing some novel approaches as well. I think the underpinning for us is the technology, the care team, and evidence-based protocol that we know will show improvement to symptoms and that we've been able to prove out at scale. I think what things like the microbiome analysis for Vivante does, it's not required by each member, so it's up to the member if they do want to engage with an analysis like that. And it does allow us to look at the bacteria in their gut, and that's what it tells you, right? Here's the levels of different bacteria in your gut, and here's how it compares to cohorts of other individuals with maybe the same condition or same symptoms. From there, what we really want to focus on is getting them back into that clinical pathway, that evidence-based protocol that we know is going to result in better outcomes for the member. So it gives us an opportunity to educate the member a little bit on their bacteria, but quickly drive them back into that clinical protocol that we know is going to produce outcomes. You asked about kind of probiotics and things like prescribing. And so we're not doing any prescribing or recommendations of specific probiotics today. We will educate members on probiotics and the potential for probiotics, but we're not, for instance, we see it as a potential conflict of interest if we were selling or making recommendations on specific probiotics. And we want to be agnostic. We want to come clearly with just one mission, and that's to improve the members' health that we serve.
Super interesting. And when you think about the space that you're operating in, and you look at maybe the arc of what has happened in diabetes care and management, and then you compare that to something like, chronic disease focused on gut health. What has been done in terms of educating the market, educating employers, educating carriers so they can know what they're getting? And then what is left to do in terms of maturing the market and getting it to a place where maybe there's other people coming in because they see the opportunity and an opportunity to support and help people make people's lives better?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think we've done a lot in educating and evangelizing this as a major issue. And what makes it easier for us is we have great data to go and do that. You can look at the National Institute on Health, and they're the ones that'll tell you that over 73 million people in the U.S. alone are diagnosed with a chronic digestive condition. So just by comparison, that's twice the size of the number of individuals diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in the US. So that's a massive, massive problem. So I think for us, you can use the numbers to tell a very good story. I think what is taking a little bit more time is getting the member view out in the open. Because when you start talking about these conditions, unfortunately, a lot of them unfairly carry a stigma to them. It's difficult for people to talk about things that are associated with digestive health. And as you get people telling their member story, what you hear is that it's oftentimes difficult to get an accurate diagnosis. There's both overutilization and underutilization. It's taxing mentally. And it's something that people live with every single day. So I think getting those patient stories out in the open so that people can really have a intellectual conversation about this and understand what it's like to live day in, day out with some of these conditions is a pretty important aspect. What we've seen is definitely a turn in the market in terms of the attention of this. I mean, John, you mentioned it very clearly, but we're experiencing that. We're growing like crazy. We're having more and more employers sign up. We're having better relationships and faster relationships with the health plans. So I think there's a big recognition of the need here, and we're seeing that just in terms of our growth every day. So I think that's what's exciting. And then I think in terms of the future, my view is anytime you have more people focused on improving the health and well-being of members across the world, that's a great thing. So what I'm hoping for is more entrance into this space, because I think that competition helps, and I think more and more innovation helps. So I think that's what I'm hoping for, is just to see more and more new entrants in the digestive health space.
Yeah. And you mentioned, that number, that's really interesting, that the number is about double of the folks with, population with type 2 diabetes. When you zoom out and you think about why that is, how much of this stuff, and I know you're not, maybe some of the clinical people on your team and data scientists, et cetera, can have informed you on this as well. How much of this is related to like genetic factors and how much is related to lifestyle factors? Because we hear that so much of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is actually preventable through lifestyle decisions.
Yeah. So a lot of it just with digestive health is also preventable. Not all of it. There's always genetics involved, but in terms of lifestyle, we think about food as medicine. We see so many different conditions and symptoms that can be changed with a change of nutrition, a change of lifestyle, that doesn't need to result in whether that's expensive surgeries in some cases or procedures. So we see it, and we see it show up in our data in terms of the people that we're working with. We have incredible patient stories of individuals who have been searching for a solution for years, and in some cases have seen multiple providers, and come and work with us for 12 weeks and say, hey, my symptoms are completely reduced and I'm feeling amazing. I feel like you gave me my life back. And then we've seen it borne out at scale as well. We have been really fortunate to work with some great partners, and we released a case study for a 30,000 life client that showed higher than three times ROI and hard cost alone.
Wow.
And so we're really fortunate because we know we're impacting the members' lives each day. but then we also know we have a proven solution that can decrease costs for our partners as well.
And you guys are primarily telehealth, right? It's a virtual experience, 100%.
100%. We have
Yeah.
no brick and
So,
mortar.
so
So
what?
100% virtual.
So what are the biggest challenges that come with that from a user experience, customer experience? Like, are there any? Where do you experience maybe the most hiccups or barriers? In terms of the delivery of care in a digital environment, and then where does the digital model show up and win in terms of what you can do there versus in person?
Yeah. So I think for us, it's really interesting because another one of the key themes that we see with digestive conditions is the CDC did a report a couple years back that showed digestive symptoms were the number one reason people showed up in the emergency room in the U.S.
Wow.
And so when you think about brick and mortar, there's absolutely a place for brick and mortar. I think with a digital first approach like we have, what's great is we can fix a few things. We can work with individuals who today are receiving the right care, but we can fill those gaps. So if someone is going to see their doctor every 6 months, we're able to track their progress. We're able to make sure that they're doing what they need to do in between those visits so that they don't kind of fall off path, because again, life's hard and things come up. We can also work with individuals before they ever get to a brick and mortar. And so for those individuals that might need a change in nutrition, change in lifestyle, or just a simpler way to even follow their prescribed medication and stay more adherent, we can see that impact so that they don't end up as a catastrophic claim in the future. And then the third piece is the individuals who maybe are underutilizing the system. And so that's where risk identification comes in. And so we have members today that we are, just through our initial intake process, we're identifying them as elevated risk for things like colorectal cancer. So, hey, you're due for a colorectal cancer screening, or Barrett's esophagus, which could eventually lead to esophageal cancer. And so what we can do is message to them the importance of getting into seeing a specialist or a primary care physician, and to sharing the information that we've shared with them on why they're at elevated risk, so that that provider is now informed with this patient walking in for the first time into their door. So I think it's important to have all of that suite for members to have access to. But for Vivante, being a digital organization has been great for us because it's allowed us to have this national reach. We've got members that we support throughout the country, and allows us to drive those early outcomes quick.
It sounds, in so many ways like a no-brainer for the end user, and it's free care for something that many of us face and maybe don't talk about. Why does your partner team, sales team, growth team hear no from employers? Like, what are the biggest objections when you're actually selling this thing through? And how have you guys overcome those? And I kind of asked selfishly too, being in the benefit space.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think for anyone in the benefit space, this will come as no surprise. But so we don't hear no much at all.
Okay.
What we do hear, especially in the past year, a lot has been not now. Really interesting, but not now. It's exactly right. Timing and priorities. And John, the folks that we talk to on the employee benefit side, the buyers, the total rewards folks, they are so busy, and there is so much on their plate that for them it can be sometimes difficult to navigate all these different solutions, and they wear a lot of hats at these organizations sometimes as well. So we really just try to give them the information to support their decision, and we do some unique things. With our outcomes, we've been able to go and offer fees at risk. So guaranteeing a financial return for the business to say, listen, we know the patient reported outcomes are going to be incredible. We know people are going to love our solution and they're not going to want to leave. But for you as a buyer, we recognize there's a financial decision as well. And so we're always willing to put fees at risk to ensure financial outcomes for the buyer, to say, hey, we're going to help reduce your healthcare spend because we're seeing real results, and we can put our money where our mouth is.
That's pretty interesting. And you guys focus on self insured, so there's a direct correlation between the service you're providing and the cost of care, do you, not necessarily any advice, but what do you think? Because there's people at smaller companies that are also dealing with these struggles and issues. Does Vivante plan on going down market? If you're an employee at a smaller company, can you ask for Vivante at your company? What are the maybe alternatives, and how do you think about the SMB market at Vivante?
Yeah, really good question. So for us, we absolutely do have plans going into the smaller market, and the primary way we would do that is through partnerships with health plans, and really looking at their fully insured blocks of business. And so what's really exciting is we're working with a number of health plans today, largely on the self-funded side, but we're having really good discussions about launches into fully insured populations. And I'll tell you, the speed with which those conversations have matured, I think, is another signal in terms of the need and the interest, because I think the plans have definitely said, yeah, this makes a lot of sense to us. So we're really excited. I think here in the next 12 months, we'll be having some pretty good launches into fully insured populations as well.
Cool. And you came from the insurance, carrier world. Maybe how much easier has it made it for you to have those conversations and speak their language? And where are there still challenges, even for someone like yourself who's come from that world?
Yeah, I would say that has been a big help for me. I think that certainly just understanding the healthcare ecosystem, understanding what they're thinking about in terms of relationships with providers, in terms of their different books of business, so that how they look at maybe Medicare Advantage versus fully insured in the small group arena versus large self-funded clients. So absolutely, that's helped me in those discussions and kind of building out that book of business. I think, but I think the big thing is there's always uniqueness plan by plan, and in healthcare, there's always localization of that healthcare as well. So it's just like any other partner and client. You really just want to understand their needs and figure out how you can best support them. Always keeping the member in mind as kind of the first person that you serve, to say, hey, does this make sense? And any decision that we're making with a partner is always, well, does it make sense for our members? Does this change in any way how we interact with or how we support our member? Because the second that changes, then we have a problem, or it's probably not going to work. So I think that's just front and foremost for me, is always just making sure that the member is treated well and supported.
And I'd love to dive a little deeper into your own, background and maybe experience. Like, growing up, did you think you'd be in the healthcare space? How did you even land at a company like Humana?
Yeah, I did not. I studied economics at Vanderbilt, and figured I'd probably end up. I'm from North New Jersey, and I always assumed I'd be back in kind of New York in the finance world. And I remember my senior year, I took a healthcare economics course, and it blew my mind because of the incentive structures and the misalignment of information, and just the unique way that healthcare works in the U.S. compared to so many other industries. And so that was my kind of first eye-opening experience to healthcare, really. And so from there, I knew I wanted to work in healthcare. And Humana was a great organization to work for. I went through their leadership program, so I got to move around with them throughout the country, just learn all different aspects of the business, learn from a lot of great people along the way. And I always talk about building a portfolio of experiences, because the more kind of differentiation you can have, and you take a piece from each area and you learn from it and grow. And so that was really kind of what got me into healthcare, and then just kind of kept going from there.
Super interesting. And then what do you think it was about your background that got you to becoming the CEO? Or maybe not even you and your background, because I think that's a little bit more obvious. It's like, on paper, it makes sense. You're at Humana, you went to, is it Vita Health?
Virta Health.
Virta Health.
Yeah.
And now, then Vivante, and now you're the CEO. But maybe what is it about your work ethic, your mental models, the way you think, and your skill sets as an executive that put you in this position of leadership?
Yeah, I think for me, I think every role has always been about people. And so, back to my time at Humana, what I would always do is I'd raise my hand for any opportunity where I had the opportunity to go learn from somebody and develop from the people around me. And I think anytime that I've been hiring throughout my career at Humana and Verda and Vivante, it's surrounding myself with the best people possible. Um, and so I think that's really for me what it's always been about is find great people that are passionate about what they're doing. We do have a no asshole rule, and that's something that I'm very passionate about. Is life's too short to work with people with huge egos that are going to fight for accolades internally. And I think when I think about the people I work with at Vivante, we just have a mission-driven team that are selfless in nature, that again really put the member first every day. And when you're doing that, I mean, you're going to run into stuff. There's always going to be barriers, but you're building it together. You're going through those obstacles together. And so I think for me, that's always been a passion is people. And I think that suited me well.
I love that. I ask, you answered it well, like what's inherent to you. And it sounds like people skills, people management. And then also just like understanding like the lifeblood of any company is your people, rather than maybe your product, even the people are creating the product. I always like to always ask, as well, what skill set have you had to hone in or refine in order to now be in your position? It sounds like people it was maybe more easy or something that comes naturally to you. What have you had to kind of step out of your comfort zone to better hone in?
Yeah, the biggest thing has been time management. And that's been an evolution throughout my career. And I would say not just specific to Vivante, but as I led bigger and bigger teams at Humana, because when you love spending time with people and developing people and thinking about people, sometimes your calendar fills up with people time, one-on-ones and that's okay. But I think, what I've learned over the years is there's a more efficient and effective way to still develop people, spend a lot of time with them, but kind of limit that and get it more focused and tailored. And so I think that's something that I've had to develop over time. And that's a journey. It's not that I have a playbook of here's how it's done. And I'm always looking at things like that of, kind of learning from the best, learning from people, taking ideas from people that have done it before me, and learning from my team. I mean, that's the other big thing is, the best ideas come from, the people that are doing it every single day, and it's asking them, what makes sense with you in terms of our communication, how it's working, and what we need to kind of co-create and co-develop. And so I think that's something that will always be a journey of iteration.
Totally. And the last year and a half, maybe it was a little bit different as many of us were transitioning to working more from home, and maybe even had to redefine some of the ways that we do things. Were there any tactical changes or things that you implemented in the last year and a half that are maybe different in order to continue optimizing for that and becoming more efficient and effective?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, we're unique because we are a completely remote workforce. We were that way prior to COVID. But I think what I quickly realized, so we were used to doing, we were a lot of time on Zoom. That was always part of our culture and our DNA, which we had to do because we're dispersed. What I did find after a few months of our whole team going through this experience that we've all been through with COVID, was that we were getting true and Zoom fatigue and burnout on fatigue. And so what we started to institute is we did things like no meeting Wednesdays, where unless they were absolutely essential or external, we wouldn't be scheduling stuff internal to give people a little bit of a break. And then one of the things that I instituted with my team, and I said, this is optional for everybody, but I highly recommend it, is I started doing, I said, let's kill the Zoom and I'm going to do a walk while I do my discussion with you. Now, of course, if we're looking through a financial analysis or we're looking through a pipeline report or a new product report, we're actually going through development plan, then we're in front of our computer. But if we're doing things that are a little bit more conversational in nature, we started to do more just things like no Zoom, get out and walk. And so I think that was an adjustment for us, which was interesting because we had been so used to Zoom, but then we quickly, I think, kind of got fatigued by it like so many others.
I love that. I love that. It's as long as there's not too many crazy outside noises, I think getting outside and getting a little bit of time outdoors is really important. A little bit of an different question than I typically ask, but in many ways, in addition to the cost savings that you guys are providing, there's a competitive advantage that you guys are providing to employers because they're getting to align their values and their culture of their company, of whether it's wellness first or people first, with their benefits. And I think we're in a similar world where the war for talent has gotten so competitive, especially in and around the tech or tech-enabled space, that companies need to differentiate themselves when it comes to their benefits and their comp and their culture. How do you think about that on the opposite side? Not as the selling to employer side, but within your own company, like attracting and retaining the best talent. You speak so eloquently about people. What do you guys do tactically to make sure that you guys are getting the best people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for organizations like Vivante, we're so mission driven that we're really fortunate because we just attract those types of candidates. We attract people that want to build something unique and different. And I always tell everyone, I'm like, listen, if this was easy, somebody would have already built it. So, and we're honest and upfront when we're talking to folks in the interview process. I think that's one of the things they get is we're very transparent. And we say, listen, we believe so fully in what we're doing, and we've got all this proof, and this is where we're going. And it's so exciting, and it's novel, and it's new, but that means it's really hard. And so, what you come into is you're building, and you're building something new and unique. And so I think our messaging and our message tends to attract people. And then I think when they hear the transparent view, when we say, hey, if you're looking for something that's super easy and it's all baked and ready to go, this probably isn't for you. I think it's almost refreshing for those candidates. So I think that's from a tactical standpoint, it's transparent communication from jump, letting them know kind of, hey, here's all the great things about the organization, but here's just like any growing organization, the stumbles that we go through. And then I think the other tactical thing for us is I would say that we do a very nice job with interviewing. So we have a pretty rigorous process in terms of how we interview, and it's at every single level, whether it's a data scientist or a care team member or a SVP of operations. We have a pretty rigorous process that we follow, and I think that helps because it sets the tone right out of the gate. And the people that go through the process, we know really want to be there. So it's always important for us to set that kind of bar as they enter the organization.
Amazing. And you mentioned communication. What have you done maybe outside of like your work life or personal life in order to become a better communicator?
So I would say I definitely read a lot about, again, it's borrowing from others, it's understanding who does it well, looking at great communicators and even looking at process. I mean, when I talk about communication, I think, we talk a lot at Vivante about transparency, collaboration, and accountability. And we have our KPIs that are company wide. Anyone can look at them anytime because I want everyone to have a very straightforward view of here's how the company's doing it any day. So anytime, any day, they can pull it open and they can see how we're doing as an organization. We have a company-wide annual planning session where we do a retro, start, stop, keep. Each team unit stands up and talks about what we accomplished, what we missed, what we're changing for next year in terms of the greater company goals. And then we go through our tactics approach that we're going to measure along the way. And then we do quarterly planning. And so then we break those down into 90 days. And a big part of that is reminding people why we're doing it. And again, it just sets the tone for that transparency, that collaboration, and that accountability. And what's great is we're co-creating everything. So team members are standing up saying, this is what my team and I are committing to for the next 90 days. And they're all measurable metrics. This is how we're going to get there. And then we get to that 90 days and they stand up and they say either we hit them or we didn't. And if we didn't, here's what we learned, and here's what we're adjusting for next quarter, and here's any material impact that might have on the annual goal. And so through that process, and the first, anytime you set this type of process up, right, that first time, the first couple of times going through it, it's a lot of work. But then you can really start to automate that process. And what you get out of it is just kind of everyone rowing in the same direction, a very clear understanding of what's going on with the organization, and an empowered workforce who says, hey, I know what's going on in this company. I'm creating the goals right along with everybody else, and I'm putting my name on it. I'm putting my ownership to say, this is what I'm going to commit to, and this is what I'm going to do in the next 90 days on an incremental level to help move us towards those big company milestones.
Well said. I love it. I love it. Anything else you'd like to add, Bill, before we wrap up?
John, I think let me close with two things. Number one, I mentioned before, I have what I think is the best job in the world. And the reason I think that and believe that fully is we at Vivante are building something that's impacting members' lives today. We've got the patient-reported outcomes that are incredible. We've got the financial outcomes at scale where we know we're saving cost. That's amazing. What's also incredible is we're in this space where so much more is going to happen in the future. There's so much interest in digestive health. And so we're going to be able to look at things like these dynamic risk assessments, medical and pharmacy claims, interactions with healthcare team members, daily symptom loggings, microbiome information, all layered together to start to make really unique and innovative conclusions in terms of what can impact these conditions. So that's what I'm really excited about. And then the last thing I would say is just I appreciate the time, John, because anyone, you guys are doing a phenomenal job, and anyone who's interested in improving health and well-being of people here across the world, I'm just a big fan of. So I'm rooting for you guys, and I love these types of conversations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to keep growing and learning. And watching what you guys do in the coming months and years, and really appreciate you carving out time to share more about the business, share more about your leadership philosophy, and would love to continue it soon when we're in the same city.
That sounds great, John. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.